Dear friends, today we continue our sermon series for Lent, focusing on the Old Testament, reading from 1 Samuel 16 verses 1 to 13. Our theme for this morning is what's really important in your life. The world's greatest detective, Sherlock Holmes, and his faithful companion, Dr. Watson, were on a camping trip. They were on their sleeping bags looking up at the sky. Holmes said, "Watson, look up. What do you see?" Watson answered, "Well, I see 1,000 stars." "And what does that mean to you?" Holmes inquired. "Well," said Watson, "I guess it means we will have another nice day tomorrow." Watson paused for a moment and then asked, "What does it mean to you, Holmes?" "To me," said Holmes sombrely, "it means someone has stolen our tent." No wonder Holmes was called the world's greatest detective. There are many things in life that ought to be obvious. In fact, they are obvious, but sometimes we forget. One of the things we forget is what's really important in our life. For example, what's really important in life is not how we look. Oh, we think it is. You and I could be very rich if we could somehow get our hands on a tiny fraction of the money people in our land spend each week trying to look good, as if appearance were the one thing in life that really matters. A well-known author and minister writes sadly of his mother, who died a very lonely death as an old woman. Let me read you his words. "She was by no means heartless, but I think hers was a heart that, who knows why, was rarely, if ever, touched in its deepest place. To let it be touched there was a risk that, for reasons known only to her, she was apparently not prepared to take. Because there was a sense of hollowness within, her last years, when storms can often be at their worst, were marked with sadness. Being beautiful was her business, her art, her delight, and it took her a long way and it earned her many dividends. But when, as she saw it, she lost her beauty, she was like a millionaire who runs out of money. She took her name out of the phone book and got an unlisted number. With her looks gone, she felt she had nothing left to offer the world. So, what she did was simply to check out of the world. That old last rose of summer. The way Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich checked out of it, holding themselves up somewhere and never venturing forth except in disguise. My mother holed herself up in her apartment, then in just one room of that apartment, then in just one chair, and finally in the bed, where one morning a few summers ago, perhaps in her sleep, she died at last. What a sad chronicle of a woman who thought how she looked was the one thing that matters. It's not how we look that really matters. And it's not how smart we are or how much we know. Certainly, a good mind, like a nice appearance can be helpful. Knowledge plays a bigger role in our lives than ever before. More new information has been produced in the last 30 years than the previous 5,000. About 1,000 books are published internationally every day, and the total of all printed knowledge doubles every 8 years. Still, as Daniel Goleman so ably noted in his book Emotional Intelligence, IQ offers little to explain the different destinies of people. When 95 university students from the classes of the 1940s were followed into middle age, the men with the highest test scores in uni were not particularly successful compared to their lower scoring peers in terms of salary, productivity, or status in their fields. Nor did they have the greatest life satisfaction, nor the most happiness with friendships, family, and romantic relationships. A similar follow-up in the Middle Age was done by 450 boys, most sons of immigrants, 2/3 from families on welfare, who grew up in our poorer suburbs. 1/3 had IQs below 90. But again, IQ had little relationship to how well they had done at work or in the rest of their lives. For instance, 7% of the men with IQs under 80 were unemployed for 10 years or more. But so were 7% of men with IQs over 100. To be sure, there was a general link, as there always is, between IQ and socio-economic level of age 47s. But childhood abilities, such as being able to handle frustrations, control emotions, and get on with other people, made the greater difference. Consider also the data from an ongoing study of 81 high school graduates. All, of course, had the highest grade point average in their schools. But while they continued to achieve well in university, getting excellent grades, by their late 20s, they had climbed to only average levels of success. 10 years after graduating from high school, only 1 in 4 were at the highest level of young people of comparable ages in their chosen profession, and many were doing much less well. Again, let's not be naive. It's more advantageous to be attractive than to be homely. And it's better to be smart than to be not so smart. But there are many things more important than either of these. And there is one thing that is far important than all of the above. The Lord appointed Samuel to find a new king for Israel after God had rejected Saul. God sent Samuel to a man named Jesse the Bethlehemite. God had selected one of his sons to be the new king. God told Samuel to invite Jesse and his sons to a ritual sacrifice. As Samuel surveyed Jesse's sons, his eyes fell on Eliab. Eliab was a tall, handsome young man. He had the appearance of a leader. Samuel thought to himself, and we read it in verse 6, "Surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel in verse 7, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Here's the one thing that really matters. What's in our hearts? And deep within us, we know it's true. For example, those of you who are married, personal appearance may have played an important role in choosing your spouse. So may have been intelligence. But what is it you appreciate most in your spouse today? Most of us would agree it is their heart. I love the way he treats me. I know she will always be there for me. I know I can trust him. She's my best friend. A loving and devoted heart in the long run of life is far more important to happiness than a pretty face and a superior brain. A drunk husband snuck up the stairs quietly. He looked in the bathroom mirror and bandaged the bumps and bruises he'd received in a fight earlier that night. He then proceeded to climb into bed. Sorry, I missed a bit there. He looked in the bathroom mirror and bandaged the bumps and bruises he'd received in a fight earlier that night. He then proceeded to climb into bed, smiling at the thought he'd pulled one over his wife. When morning came, he opened his eyes, and there stood his wife. "You were drunk last night, weren't you?" she said. "No, honey," he replied sleepily. "Well, if you weren't," she said with disgust, "then who put the band-aids on the bathroom mirror?" We joke about it. But in a number of homes, it is no joking matter. There are many women who would trade in their handsome husbands for one who is faithful, one who is sober, one who is a good father to the children, one who will sit with her in church, one who treats her with respect. God does not look on outward appearances. God looks upon the heart. How is your heart this morning? Let's pray. Loving God, I thank you for your word today. In this difficult time of dealing with the COVID-19 virus, we are challenged to focus on what is important in our lives. Our mortality is in sharp focus. A song comes to mind. The things on earth grow strangely dim as we look on your glory and grace. Amen.